Hello everyone and welcome to Into the Cypher State, the premier public broadcast of Galactica Network. This week we're going to be discussing innovation and regulation in Web3 with our incredible lineup of guests. We've got some great ones today, so make sure you stick around as we will be opening the floor to you as well at the end of the space or near the end. Hopefully we can get some really good opinions and hot takes from you guys who are listening. That'll be wonderful. So my name is Citizen42.Gala within the Cypher State. You can call me Dave. But I'm joined today by my regular co-host Cosmos Hoss, and we have some incredible guests today. We're really excited. So we've got Carter Woetzel from Shade Protocol, protocol for DeFi on Cosmos, private DeFi. We've got Fraser from CheckDeo.io, data markets and ID on Cosmos. And we have Cameron Bright, who is a renowned actor from X-Men 3 and various others, and a DAO spokesperson for Swarms Finance. So welcome, guys. It's absolutely wonderful to have you up on the stage. I'm just going to let you guys take it away. Maybe you just go at random. We'll start with Fraser. If you could just introduce yourself, and if you want to introduce any protocol you're with, please do.
Cool. Thanks for having me. So hi, Fraser, CEO and co-founder at Checked. We're building a few things. One of them is decentralized ID, self-sovereign ID, and like payments infrastructure for those. But we're also building some decentralized reputation stuff where you don't even need to tell someone who you are. It's all just based around like social signals and whether someone can trust you for that interaction. And yeah, CEO of Checked. And yeah, thanks again for having me. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, more than welcome, Fraser. Absolutely. And it sounds like we're kindred spirits as far as protocols go. I'm looking forward to talking with you about that. Carter, maybe you could introduce yourself. Do we still have Carter?
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay. No worries. No, I'm just asking.
I have just a new phone yesterday. I'm actually swapping over phones today. This is the last day with this phone.
I've got to admit, you're sounding a bit robotic, Carter. It might be worth you exiting out and then coming back in, and we'll bring you back up again because you sound like kind of a very small robot.
Since 2017, always been a huge fan of decentralized finance and how we can ultimately connect it back to our everyday lives. I'm one of those people that believes privacy is actually a key piece of the puzzle, along with compliance.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And it seems like your audio problems have been cleared up, so that's awesome. It sounds like a great protocol, man. Cameron, I'd love to hear an intro from you, man.
Hello. Yeah, name's Cameron. My formal background is mostly in the film industry, and then a few years ago now, almost it seems, like two and a half years ago, I ended up getting into mining. Went down the rabbit hole of mining. And ended up buying a Cadena miner, and that kind of started me on the crypto journey. And now, basically representing Swarms Finance, which we are, DAO tooling that is being brought to the Cadena network. And yeah, I guess that's pretty much the easy part of it.
That sounds good, man. That's a really interesting transition going in from like the film industry to crypto. There's actually quite a lot of stories like that, and I love it. Like so many people transitioning to Web3. I came in from carpentry myself, like from a very long time ago. But there's so many different backgrounds in Web3. It's awesome to have all these perspectives. And Hoss, mate, could you just introduce yourself for anyone who doesn't know you already?
Yeah, so my name's Cosmos Hoss. I've been in crypto shortly after COVID began, and my background was in accounting, and it still is. So that's not really too uncommon of a transition, because realistically, all blockchain really is a decentralized accounting ledger, and you build cool things on it. And over the last couple of years, it's been really cool and fascinating that just all the different innovative ways to build things in crypto, not necessarily just DeFi protocols. And, we're kind of starting to venture off into other avenues of this technology. So, I'm just here for the ride, man. I really put everything into this space. This is my passion. I want to be doing it the rest of my life. So I love doing these spaces selfishly, get to meet new people, hear their perspectives. And, this is like the only space ever in existence where you can just so easily collaborate and just communicate with one another, like regardless of your backgrounds. Like this is a pure example, with people throughout the world and different lives of work and things of that nature, and we're all just kind of chilling, talking, and that's kind of what I like to do. So that's what I'm doing.
Man, your passion comes across every time you speak, man. It really does. It's awesome to have you here. Always good to have you as co-host, man. Great, guys. So what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to remind everyone who's in the audience right now, if you could please just dive down into the comments of the space, give us a like, give us a retweet, and please give us a comment if you'd like us to bring up any of your points this early in the stage. You will have the opportunity to come up to the stage later on in the space and have your point as a speaker. But for now, just use the comments. I think we should just carry on, just get through it. So I'd like to kind of start us off by asking our speakers what you think regarding the current state of innovation in our space, like the difficulties we have as builders, and perhaps end up going down some paths forward if we can. So I guess one of the first things I would like to actually talk about is something that's quite recent in the news. This is something that affects everyone really. So the recent congestion happening with the Bitcoin network. Now, this is happening because of innovation. It's happening because we have these ordinals and all these derivatives of ordinals and all this stuff that's being enabled by it. We've got so many transactions going on the Bitcoin network that it's slowing down. It's slowing down quite some, to the point where even Binance had to pause withdrawals. So is everyone on the panel maybe aware of all this? Does anyone have a specific take? I think, maybe if you could just raise your hand if you have something that you really want to jump on, guys. Please, Fraser, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not surprised. I'm surprised anyone is surprised. I mean, it's always going to happen, and it's happened before. But I think on the congestion side, like it was one of Check's reasons for choosing Cosmos. Like we started just over. Actually, we founded just around 2 years ago, and we were looking at like how we'd build an identity network and like what projects are like the way that we build, and we had a load of options between like build some private Ethereum stuff, leverage Ethereum mainnet, like maybe use something like Ion, which is a layer 2 runs on Bitcoin, and like genuinely one of our decks has like it's like we needed to avoid the Elon Musk problem, and basically it was like whenever he tweets about like I don't know, like Shiba or whatever, and then the network gets clogged, and then suddenly everything breaks. So we're like, we can't have that for identity transactions. Like, that's bad enough when you're trying to buy like an NFT or you're trying to trade. It's like pretty, like it's just going to destroy everything if that's like if you end up in a situation where you can get like denial of identity because Elon Musk is tweeting random shit about or like putting the logo into Twitter. And so as a result, we're just like we've got to have our own network, and and then it became a shootout between like Polkadot and Cosmos, and I'm so glad we chose Cosmos because just the engineering is so much more solid, and the community seems to be there. So yeah, I mean, like it doesn't really surprise me. I think it surprised me that it's like taken so long and people haven't realized, and it's new. But I think it kind of vindicates like the app chain thesis, and then like looking at layer twos and that kind of thing because yeah, this was always going to happen. And I guess the main thing I'm glad about is that I'm not suffering it like on our network, and everything's just like ticking along exactly how it should be.
Fraser, to ask you, I guess, do you think Bitcoin should just only be just like a store of value and nothing else?
Ooh, good question. I mean, like the open source, like take the protocol wherever you want side of me is like do whatever, like fine, put ordinals on there, like do whatever you want. I think the practical side of me is like I would only ever use it for that store of value because of the issues that it has. So, I mean, I'm not really coming down on either side there. There's like a philosophical side of me, which is like, I'll do whatever you want with it because that's kind of what it's there for. But the actual like practical side of me is in terms of like me personally achieving stuff like on a day-to-day basis, like, yeah, just store a value because I just couldn't use it for anything else. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to know what everyone else thinks there of like whether they come down on either side as well as yourself, Cosmos Hoss. Like, do you come down on either side of that argument?
I do agree with you in the sense like if it's open source, people can do whatever they want because it's open source. But also like I really kind of sway more towards, by default, Bitcoin kind of turned into store of value, and I think it's perfect for that. Like that's the main purpose. Like I don't want to use it for anything else besides store of value. Like, oh, you know what? Let me buy some satoshis, some sats, and just put them on a hardware wallet or whatever, and forget about it. Like I don't want to do anything else. And I'm not gonna lie, I do have some random ordinals, but it's like I'm not in it for that. I only did it just because I'm an NFT guy and I like having NFTs, and I'm like, you know what? Why not? I'll have one on Bitcoin, but I'm not sitting here spending hours upon hours a day like trying to find some NFTs that are ordinals or whatnot. So like I guess I'm more on the side of it's great for store of value, and what's the use case in the future? I think store of value. What's going to get other new people into this space to use Bitcoin, store of value, because they're tired of their currencies getting diluted and things like that. But they also would probably prefer it to actually work and not be so congested. So like, the best case scenario for Bitcoin is for it to be a store of value, and that's like it. Like everyone knows, like, all right, if you want to store value, because there's technically only going to be 21 million of them ever, in theory there's always going to be less than that because so many people lost their Bitcoin, but that's it. Like let's just get it done, and that's it. So I guess that would be my point.
On that note, I saw like it was from like I think possibly thousands of years ago, at least certainly hundreds, and there's like a great parallel for like Bitcoin. I think it was in like some South Sea island culture where they had these massive, massive stones, like huge, um, and they'd spend all this effort, like, and you'll start to see where the parallels are here. So the villages and the towns had spent these massive amounts of effort, like getting these stones out of the ground and then carving them into rings. And some of these things were like potentially the size of cars, like some of them were gigantic. And they had various sizes, but what used to happen was like for the bigger ones, they'd never move like the stone themselves, like at all. But what they would change is who owned the stone, and they'd use like different increments to be like, oh, so and so has this much wealth, or so and so has this much wealth, and then you could basically like trade between them for goods by just changing the ownership of the stones. And I don't know, there's part of that that like the parallel is so close to Bitcoin that sometimes I look at that and go like, just based on its properties, like that system was never going to be used for anything else other than a store of value. And maybe that's the way with Bitcoin. Like, yes, you could do whatever you want with it, but the properties of the network mean it goes down a specific path. I'll try and dig out in the background like where that came from, but I sort of was like, holy shit, this is like so close in terms of parallels to like what's going on with the network versus like old time stuff.
No, that's fascinating. And then, like, I think the other use case that I actually would prefer Bitcoin to be used for is like timestamping transactions. So, if someone's, staking whatever asset like Atom and it takes 21 days, or some other asset that takes 2 weeks or 3 weeks, instead of them having to wait the whole time, they can, leverage Bitcoin security network and say, okay, well, you can unbond it in a day now or whatever. But other than that, like, I don't think it really should be for for JPEGs. But we'll ask the other guest here what they think about that kind of potential with Bitcoin.
Yeah, for sure. Cameron, do you have much exposure to Bitcoin, and what do you think of this?
Yeah, if anything, I'm just in agreement with you guys. Basically, it I don't know. It's one of those things where obviously coming from Cadena, we are, proof of work blockchain that is highly, inspired by Bitcoin, especially having Stuart Haber as one of our advisors, I guess you could say, to the team. Those of you that don't know, Stuart Haber was literally the guy who invented blockchain in like the 80s. And he's I think the most cited author or whatever on the original Bitcoin white paper as well. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where you look at, if you look at the top two, obviously being Bitcoin and Ethereum, you have your kind of, like your standards, I guess you could say. Bitcoin is that kind of godfather, old faithful store of value in my mind. And then we have the builder's paradise, so to speak, which is EVM and Ethereum, right? So, I think we'll see what happens. I'm one of those guys where I'm proof of work through and through. So I'll always believe in proof of work's longevity more so than anything else, especially, seeing as though we're still have yet to go through like big regulation changes and everything. And who knows what will end up happening with proof of stake and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I guess if anything I think that, ordinals are cool again. Like, yeah, I'm an NFT guy too, and NFTs anywhere is cool in theory, but I'm not going to flock to Bitcoin just for ordinals kind of thing, So yeah, I think it will, if anything, that's, I do relate it more so to, your kind of gold or silver, it's like, obviously, unless you bought at the high of like last year, then you might be a little pissed off. But for the most part, yeah, like you're not going to see crazy price action on Bitcoin, 9 times out of 10. So yeah, it is a better store of value than most, I would say. And, at least the blockchain's going to be there and it won't be getting shut down by regulations or anything anytime soon. Hopefully, I should say, I guess.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, to be honest, and it's a strange battle, I guess, between innovation and purity of purpose. I guess you could call it like purity of purpose, and whether those two things are mutually exclusive or not. So I guess everyone's trying to innovate on the Bitcoin network, and they're trying to get it to. I guess what they're trying to do is just get some of the functionality of ETH of some of the proof of stake networks onto the Bitcoin network, but whether that dilutes the Bitcoin's like purity of purpose to the point where it can't actually fulfill it's an interesting question, I suppose, and that's a very long-term question, of course. But yeah, no, it's very interesting, Cam. Fraser, do you have a take on this?
Oh, it's just a final thing of like, are we basically debating whether Bitcoin forms part of the app chain thesis? Is that basically what we're debating here?
In a sense, yeah.
Yeah, it's just I think it's going to head that way in terms of like if it's all going to be driven by utility, right? And if it's not, you can't use it. It's very quickly going to focus onto like where it is useful. I think. I mean, we'll find out over the next couple of years, but like, yeah, I think it's naturally going to go down that direction just because of the nature of it. And I found that link to those stones, which I popped down below. So if anyone's interested in some like old history from what was it, Micronesia of all places, it's dropped down below the space.
Yeah, that looks like a really simplified, very completely reliable way of doing one thing very well. And that's, I guess, a good analog for Bitcoin, right?
I'd also just hop in here and say that like the history of the internet, if you look at how distributed systems typically evolve, like you're going to have a mesh of networks with multiple different throughput routes. Like right now we pretty much have, let's say 5 to 10 blockchains that make up probably like north of 80% of the commerce. And so you're going to have throughput problem. And so the answer to that is there's going to be a lot more bridging infrastructure that evolves, and the UI UX for moving assets off of these main chains will hopefully become more and more fluid and fast, and the liquidity on these faster chains will improve. So I think, if we go 20 to 30 years from now, I highly doubt it'll be the same situation where we're in now. The ability to execute transactions, though, on these chains that have a high degree of security, I think those premiums will only continue to grow over time. Like, I don't think there really is a way around making Bitcoin transactions cheaper. If the demand continues to grow to leverage it, the situation's probably only going to get 10 to 100x worse from here as opposed to better. Same with Ethereum, and that's just it's a sign that there's a lot of value in transacting on such a secure blockchain that's a source of truth. So if I had to predict, situation gets exponentially worse the next decade. But the flip side of that is the accessibility to faster and cheaper chains, and hopefully the security around accessing those chains should also improve exponentially.
We can only hope, man. We can only hope. Yeah, so I don't know if you guys have seen also that there have actually been some proposals put forward through Bitcoin's governance for like basically just stopping this like ordinals and everything else at the technical level, which will be an interesting thing. I don't know what the actual ramifications of that will be. Perhaps some very high-priced ordinals, maybe lack of supply. But yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think of that? Like actually blocking this through governance and returning the purity of purpose to Bitcoin?
I mean, it kind of goes back to where we started originally of like it's open, it's free, and obviously it's like beloved of like libertarians worldwide. So the fact that like they're proposing to clap down on something they don't like is a little bit ironic. I don't know if I think that also like the genie is out now. Like people are doing it. It's got market. Like I think to Carter's point, like it's got market demand, and that's the thing driving like transactions and like blockages is that like people want to be doing this, so they could have an uphill battle on their hands. Like I think if they want to take it back, and I think there's a parallel to like a few years ago when there's one of the guys who ended up like as an engineer working, I think at R3 Corda, one of the private blockchains, and he used to be like a core Bitcoin engineer, and then I think the community just like wasn't forward thinking enough in where it needs to go. And I think it was something to do with like block sizes that they were looking at. And there was this whole debate and basically like just nothing ever moved. And he just left the community. He was like, it's just not moving quick enough for it to be like the future that he believed in. So yeah, I don't know. That's a lot of rambling for like, I don't know. But I can't see it like with the philosophy that Bitcoin has that they can like go back and take them, like just stop ordinals in code, if that makes sense. Like it just feels like it's antithetical to the beliefs of like a lot of that community.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange thing. It's just a very strange beast, Bitcoin, because obviously you have the original vision of Satoshi Nakamoto, which is like completely inclusive financial rails for all. And then you have the governance issues, in which you suddenly realize that perhaps Bitcoin isn't quite as decentralized as you really want it to be, as far as at least its governance goes. So just the very fact that anyone can talk about this and actually have a chance of it happening is interesting. But yeah, it's a difficult thing, and one that not really anyone can answer.
I think there's always a danger of like taking a vision from someone who's disappeared. It's just like taking an entire set of like lessons and visions from something that like hasn't evolved. Like yes, it was a vision, but it was a vision at a point in time, and it was based on like available tech, available beliefs, like probably like obviously the context of like financial crisis and that was like really recent to it. Like, and there's so many other options now, and you've got to wonder like how would that have changed if that was available at the time. So yeah, I'm like one for like just adjust your beliefs as new facts come in, I guess, is where I'm at. Like don't stick to something just because it's tradition. Like that's almost always a terrible reason for something. I mean, look at the UK and the coronation recently. Sorry if you're a royalist, by the way, but just that was where I was at.
No, man, I get it completely. Oh dear, yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. I guess it's one of those things where Bitcoin is it's just very old tech, you know, and it's a very old thesis behind it. You're right, and there are 20 better options right now. There are hundreds of options that do different things a lot better than Bitcoin. Options that would be like actual financial rails for the world a lot better than Bitcoin. Whereas, like I say, Bitcoin, it's kind of got to have this ability to be digital gold for it to have true relevance, I suppose. And yeah.
I'd love to hear Carter's thoughts on the thing I'm about to say, but like I can't remember where I read it, but it was someone who was arguing that like if the CIA was going to create something that was like perfect for them to track money laundering, they'd create Bitcoin, because you could just watch, like as soon as you had control of like half of the on ramps and off ramps, like you just knew exactly who was paying who and where the money was going. And that I really want to find out where I read that, but it's just stuck with me ever since. Of like, it is not private in any kind of way, and as a result, is like, yeah, Chainalysis. Is it Chainalysis? Who I need to remember the firm that like does all these investigations, but like it's basically like their wet dream, because you could just follow the traces, and it's so easy to do. But if Carter's still around, I'd love to know his thoughts on that with like building private DeFi.
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, as someone who wrote a book, published author, there's actually a section that covered kind of the origin story of Satoshi, and there's an interesting part where one of the core developers on the Bitcoin team was rolling up to a conference, and they were either invited by the CIA to speak, or the CIA rolled up to the conference, and it was within 48 hours of that conference that Satoshi went silent. So you can either interpret that like one of two ways. It was like mission complete, and you can run with the conspiracy, or you can run the other side of the story and be like, Satoshi realized that he was on some people's radar, and then he or she dipped. So that's a fun little rabbit hole to go down that trail. But in terms of the privacy piece, I completely agree. Like I think when Satoshi, let's assume non-conspiracy. I think the hardest part about Bitcoin is like the on ramps, right? Like essentially, people are really lazy with how they get capital into crypto, and in fairness, it's like really difficult to do that because we're all tied to, legacy financial systems. So people are trading the ease of onboarding capital to these digital assets in return for giving up their personal information and giving a very clear path to tracking how their assets are being moved around. So I think we're always going to be stuck with that to a degree, because if you want to be able to integrate with sovereign states in some capacity, if you want to be able to integrate with businesses, it's going to be very difficult to have a pure privacy solution. So I'm more of a pluralist when it comes to the privacy side of things. I think there needs to be a variety of solutions that match users and match businesses' needs. And so there's going to be people that are going to want total privacy. There's going to be people that want total transparency. And the best thing we can do in Web3 is build the plurality of tooling that empowers those different groups, and then make sure that we fight tooth and nail as it comes to legislation and education, that people understand that privacy is a utility, and it actually is a key part of our financial infrastructure outside of crypto. Like the way merchants work, the way hospital data works, there's a huge number of fields where data privacy represents security. And privacy isn't seen as a bad thing there. It's seen as a immense necessity in making sure that commerce works. So I think we have to fight tooth and nail so people understand the value of privacy, that it's not as simple as, privacy equals bad people, transparency equals good people. It's more like we need sovereignty for users. We need that privacy tooling, and then we need good frameworks on the compliance side that people can actually plug into.
Man, I knew I was going to like our guests today, but I'm just in awe of our guests today. It's fantastic. So that's basically the kind of approach that Galactica Network itself takes. If for anyone who doesn't know, we're the host of Galactica Network. We are a protocol that allows for both reputation on chain, privacy on chain, and what we, to Carter's point, essentially we're a privacy by default. So we allow users to mostly transact via what we call ZK certificates, which are essentially an analog of soul-bound tokens, which allow for selective disclosures, private selective disclosures of your information. So this is all like on by default. You can select who and when you disclose your information to, but it gives us the ability to have a network that is both private by default, but also that we can be compliant with regulations in whatever region is required. So it's just that. It's exactly what you were saying, Carter. It's like privacy is, as you say, a utility, and it's something that it needs to be available. It needs to be, I think personally, it needs to be by default. What anyone else? Sorry, I'm rambling as the host. It's silly. So Fraser, what do you think on this? Or Cameron, if you have a point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was like Carter was saying, like it's a range. Like some people, I think it all depends on what you're doing. Like one example I heard from someone who was running it's like a car marketplace, like eBay for cars, and they were like selling this car, and so this was like someone on their marketplace. They were selling this car, and a guy showed up, asked to test drive the car, and then like left no details and just drove off with the car. And like that whole interaction, it just blows my mind, the fact that like someone would do that. But there's obviously like that's a transaction where like you need some proof of who the other person is, like if you're going to let someone like take your car for a spin, or like something equivalent to like the worth of your car that you can offset against. And so like even I think in peer-to-peer, like you have drastically different levels of like privacy and trust that you need to establish between people. So I think I completely agree with Carter there, of like it's a range, and you're going to have regs throughout the world where like if you're crossing a border, like unless you're doing it illegally, there is no way you're doing that without a passport and without showing that to someone or an ID card. And it's going to be, I can't see that ever going away. So like that concept of like just choosing not to do that is just not going to happen unless you're doing it illegally again. But then on the flip side, like I'd imagine everyone on this AMA knows people or has done this where you have transferred like 5 figures to someone that you've never met in your life before. You don't know their real name, you don't know where they live, but you've just hung out enough that you trust that person and you know that they're legit and you would get that money back if you asked. And so suddenly like that's almost like completely private to the point of like pseudonymous, but you're indexing just based on like social and transactional history.
Yeah, I mean,
and
you're
I think
talking about reputation on chain, right?
Or just general reputation. Like I know just people who've invested with us, people who are like involved as like just around the project, and they just send money to people because they have just been in Telegram groups with these guys for like 4 or 5 years. They've always helped each other out, and just like over time the numbers have gone up, and suddenly like that's just completely normal, and they'd probably do it with us within a heartbeat. But they're not indexing on like even anything on chain. They're literally just doing it based on like social interactions over the space of like years. Which but it's still like maintaining almost complete privacy because they're not even, I mean they could, but they're not even looking at like what's going in and out of the addresses that they're transferring to. They're literally just indexing on like, oh, this is like blah 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 handle, and I've dealt with this person for like years, and I've also like interacted with him on Discord. I know loads of people who trust him, therefore like I'm okay to do this. And so that's super like really privacy preserving, but still achieves like somehow a super high level of trust, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think that's needed. Like if you have a level of, if you have privacy on chain, then you kind of need to have these these social transactions and reputational transactions. Otherwise, it just doesn't really work. Guys, I'm just going to do a quick reset of the space. Just give me 2 seconds. I just want to remind the audience, thank you all for joining us. You're into the Cypher State podcast. If you could just drop down into the comments, give us a like and a retweet. And if you have any comments, please do drop them. We are going to be moving into a segment of the podcast relatively soon, in which we'll bring up some speakers from the audience to have a word with our panel of speakers, and then we will carry on with our current discussion now. Basically we have reputation on chain. We have all of this stuff that aims to make it easy and private to transact on chain, but then we have this and to innovate on chain as well. So we also have this, like, the elephant in the room of regulation. So moving on to like this part of the space, I'd just like to ask all our panel members a simple kind of question: how would you rate the regulatory regime in your own country or jurisdiction, wherever you are, on a scale of 1 to 10? Simple, just with regard to ensuring like your region is at the forefront of Web3. Maybe we can start with Cameron on this one.
Yeah, sorry. Of course, I kind of lost track of what we were mentioning. But to touch on the privacy side of things and everything, and yeah, it's, especially, we just had a chat, a DAO centered conversation on Cadena, and it's kind of one of those things where, for the future of DAOs to really be implemented into, many things, the future potential is huge, right? But you have to be able, if we ever get to that point in time where, voting systems, like literal, presidential voting systems and stuff like this is, hopefully maybe one day DAO controlled or DAO featured, you have to be able to track people, obviously, or else you're just going to have as many bots scaling elections as faulty machinery, we should say. But yeah, so it's kind of one of those things where you have to have the ability to at least do it. Obviously, then, as I think someone mentioned earlier, it depends on, really the individual or the project, how they want to, conduct themselves, I guess you could say. But it's something, with the kind of, the wave of soulbound tokens coming out and stuff like that, there are these kind of cool, inventive ways to track, your holders or your viewers or however you want to explain it. But it's something that has to happen. It has to be able to be used at least. So yeah, I guess that's my 2 cents on it. If anything, is that you're gonna have to you're going to have privacy involved at some point. Of course, even DAOs, the word is almost like a bad word. It's like decentralized, autonomous. And it's like you say both those words to the government and they're like, we don't like either of those. So, it's one of those things where, again, being able to prove someone's identity and engagement and, their wallets and everything, again, it's going to be necessary. It's kind of a necessary evil, but, to really gain that mass adoption and really reach, the real world, I guess you could say, outside of crypto, it's going to be a necessity for sure.
100%. Yeah. I mean, if we do get to that point, which I hope we do eventually, having a bit more transparent governance systems would be awesome. Then we're going to need to have Sybil resistance to the tune of complete guarantees that there's that everyone is who they say they are, and if you want to square that with privacy, it's a difficult thing. Sorry, Carter, I think you wanted to say something.
Oh yeah, well, first off, great answer from Cameron. I want to follow up with your question about the regulatory side of things. So I'm roughly based out of the U.S. and for me, like when I think about the regulatory landscape, it's kind of all about like what's the purpose of regulation, right? In my opinion, it's to promote the growth of free markets and the commerce therein, while still having protections for consumers. I would say that's like a relatively broad and accurate definition of what regulators are supposed to be accomplishing. So if we break it down into those pieces, there's the consumer protection side and there's the promotion of kind of the free markets. And if we're being entirely honest, the first 10 years of crypto, I would say from like 2008, 2009, all the way up to maybe like 2018, has been relatively free market based. The markets came out of nowhere. with essentially no, we didn't even really have definitions, right? In terms of like stages of frameworks and how they come into existence, you need regulators to agree on definitions. Once definitions are agreed upon, then you can actually create a framework to hold, everyone that's included in that framework accountable. We haven't even made it to the stage where definitions are fully agreed upon across the majority of three-letter agencies in the U.S. So there's a lot of the fear out there of people putting up frameworks, but a lot of it's to score political points. A lot of it isn't actually like instantiated yet. I think Europe honestly has pushed the furthest along in terms of definitions. They're probably the closest to actually passing comprehensive and maybe one could consider semi-sensible legislation. So on the U.S. side, it's been a lot of regulation by enforcement, as opposed to regulation via frameworks that are publicly visible and defined in a very clear way. And as a whole, it's like we're straddling this line of more and more people are afraid of what it means to be a builder in the United States, which I think is a shame, because there's a lot of excellent computer science talent here. There's a lot of excellent opportunity to plug in Web 2 infrastructure into the future of finance and have the United States as a centerpiece of that commerce, as a potential representation of freedom. It's jury's out on whether that freedom, how real that freedom is, but we'll say symbolically, loosely, roughly, that's supposed to be the truth. And so, yeah, as a whole, I think a lot of us are on edge in the U.S. And the best thing we can do is, keep building out the tooling, brace ourselves for when the definitions actually come into fruition, and then fight tooth and nail to make sure that these frameworks actually make sense, that we're protecting consumers in a sensible way while still protecting these valuable free markets that are supposed to promote and grow wealth if done correctly.
I couldn't agree more. I think it was actually Hoss who was talking about last week. We were talking about the European MiCA regulations, actually, I think. Or it might have been the week before, I'm not entirely sure. But the point was that I think, Hoss, you were a bit concerned that maybe innovation may actually simply flee completely from America. I mean, America really does have the opportunity, if it regulates correctly, to be the hub for just about everything with its economic position. But it seems to be chasing innovation away. And yeah, it's a bit of a sadness, really.
Yeah, totally. I mean, one of the things that I'm really fortunate with in this space is that, I probably have at minimum 5 calls per week where I'm speaking with different developers or, people within blockchain that are building some cool stuff. And, I could tell, I know people's voices, if they're American or not, pretty much instantaneously. And I'm like, oh, where are you based at? And I 1 week it was, I swear, no lie, probably 6 different people I spoke with. They were all Americans, and I was like, where are you at? And none of them were in America. They were everywhere else. And it was really sad and unfortunate, because we kind of opened our arms to build, Web 1, Web 2. It was all, all started here. And now it's just, there's just so many roadblocks, and people don't know what they're supposed to be doing. And it's just like everything, even with like taxation and just, there's no roadmap, there's no clarity. And then you have people enforcing, their legislation by enforcement, as opposed to like, hey, let's just put out the rules of engagement and then kind of go from there. And even the SEC's kind of way they've been acting towards Coinbase. Like, Coinbase is a public company, so they had to declare what they were trying to do from the get-go. They got the approval, and then the SEC was kind of attacking them. It's almost like, I always use the metaphor, if you're playing a sports game, whether it's football or whatever sport, competition it is, and then after the game, you change the rules to something else, and then that team that actually won the game doesn't win now because of a rule that you changed. So then you go, you know what, actually, you guys lost because we changed the rule. Like in football, you need 10 yards for a first down. We're going to make it 8 yards. And then we reviewed the tape, and this team would have had more first downs. And, it's crazy. Like, there's no rules. And that's really all anyone asked for. And Mike Carter, really spoke well about kind of giving his definition of what regulation should be and what it's supposed to do. And I couldn't agree any more with that. And it's just sad because, like, no one knows anything from any perspective of what they're trying to do. And yeah, it's sad because other countries, like the adage is another man's loss is another man's gain. These other countries would be foolish not to kind of just open up their arms, kind of cortel and cater to like, hey, if you guys are, because it's like Carter said, there's so many brilliant people. It's like, hey, we want you to come here. We won't tax you. We won't do this. Like we're opening our arms. Like we're gonna give you, clarity. So come here, and that's what's gonna happen. And I think unless America kind of really gets at it real soon here, it's going to be too late. Like, so people are just going to flee because we're at that precipice right now in this like current market conditions, where even if you look back at just a year ago where crypto was when it comes to like being able to do certain things in crypto, like it's already so further advanced. And you can imagine right now if we're having the same conversation like next year, hopefully there's different niches in crypto, and I think there will. Like, I think gaming will keep improving, music will keep improving, like just the artists. I think just the economies in general, like I think even like a creator economy for people, even developers. Like, I know there's a team called Archway. They're building out some cool things where they're basically incentivizing. So if you build some cool code, that you always get like kind of a piece. It's almost like a royalty structure economy for even developers, which to me was a pretty cool and unique and fascinating approach to like the tokenomic structure and things like that. So I don't know, man. It's just really hard. It's kind of sometimes it gets a little bit discouraging over here because I read things and the administration's trying to tax mining because of the energy consumption. But if you look at the energy consumption, like my refrigeration, my lighting, like just all kind of things in my house actually would consume more than me if I was actually mining whatever, say Bitcoin or whatever. So like that's a farce. And then if you're going to try to say, well, you need to pay 30%, how would they know? So what my theory is that in order for you to mine in America, like they're trying to push for, well, you probably need to be registered, because if you look at, like, I have government experience, if you look at like the structure of it, there's so much red tape for everything. They make it really impossible for small businesses in this country to do anything now, because you need this license, that license, this registration. It's a yearly thing, and then on top of that, there's this tax, that tax, and then there's that tax and that tax, and it's just like it's a nonstop cycle. And I think they're going to probably try to do that in America when it comes to people that want to maybe even run validators. Who knows? Like, it's all about over regulation and taxation. It doesn't get me real bullish on America's policies, but I mean it can always change too. I mean, things need to pass, and I think Coinbase is doing a really good job with their movement, and they have like this congressional, they have like, you can find out in your area in America, like who you represent, who's representing you for crypto. And like that's, to me, is like the most important thing. Like me, I don't get into like the red and the blue. It's more about just common sense, and I do tend to sway a little bit more towards another way, because like I think that over taxation is not really in my prerogative, even though I'm in that department, is taxation. I think too much of it's really bad, and it really just curates and caters to elites and corporations and kind of gets out all the middleman and small people. And I don't really like that. And that's why I kind of got into crypto, because it gives rights to small people, to people that barely have any income, regardless of where they're at. So I don't know. That's my kind of thesis on American politics and legislation through what they're doing right now. I'm not real optimistic. It's really sad, but that's how I guess say.
Yeah. Honestly, Hoss, can't really disagree with most of that. Right, guys. I think what a good idea is Hoss, if you could handle the requests as before. I'm just going to offer anyone who's in the audience the opportunity to raise their hands if they would like to speak. I think you just need to go down to the heart icon and request to speak. And then you can join in on some of these discussions, because there's some awesome stuff going on here. In the meantime, Carter, you've given us a fantastic opinion on how you think crypto regulation should be. Fraser, as sort of more of a UK, like a Euro area kind of person, what do you think about the regulatory regime in that area?
I think it's going to be an extension of what Hoss and Carter were saying though, around like I don't know if we have clarity. Like you're doing certain stuff, but then other things are just completely unknown, and I think that's the most difficult part. Um, like we have a foundation in Singapore, and one of the big reasons for that is there was complete clarity on like what is allowed, what isn't allowed, like what can you do, when can you do it, like what are the requirements for doing certain stuff, and just having those like rules and regulations isn't always like a lot of people always talk about like rules and regs being a bad thing, and but sometimes like if you can get the clarity and the clarity isn't stifling, actually it's really positive because you know exactly the barrier that you need to meet, especially if it's like fairly adjudicated to go and meet that. And I think so if you're then looking at the UK, um if you're looking at stuff like data protection, all that kind of stuff, because we're still following GDPR, all that kind like that's really well understood. Like you know exactly what you can do, what you can't do, and what the boundaries are. But then when you're looking at like, for example, advertising in the UK is like a complete grey area as far as I'm still aware. Like we were actively recommended that like our any of our marketing shouldn't be orchestrated from the UK because it might bring the project into the UK, despite the fact that our team is across the world. Um, and the same with like exchanges in the UK, completely opaque. Like no one really knows how that's working out. And just in general, how like how tokens and stuff are being treated, with the extreme being that like I think every transaction, whether it's like claiming staking rewards or a conversion like a trade, in DeFi is considered like a taxable event, I think, right now. And so like the taxes are just unbelievable because it means like every single time you claim a staking reward, you've had a taxable like it's income. Every time you've like made a trade, well, it's a trade, and therefore it's like again you've got to start recording all that stuff. And so in some areas there's just grey and you don't know what's okay and you don't know what isn't. And therefore just like the best thing is just like don't do it. But then to like Hoss's point and Carter's point, like if that's all you're doing, then you're gonna leave and you're gonna go elsewhere to do stuff where like there is more clarity. And that's a shame. Like it's a real shame. And I guess that again to repeat Cosmos Hoss's point, like it's a great opportunity for all these countries where there is clarity, where they can say exactly what the rules are, even if they're like 5% off or a little bit more difficult. If you get clarity, like that's worth so much than like hoping you're going to be okay, only to find out like 5, 6, 10 years down the line that actually like you're in deep shit. So I think the UK is a strange one on the data front, nice and easy. Crypto side, I think it's got some ways to go. I think at the same time, probably the one thing that has maybe we're a little bit too soft in the UK because we typically don't like we don't penalize companies that really have hurt consumers. But it also means that if you're in the UK, you're probably safe unless you're like robbing people in the street, and even with the police right now, like that's probably okay. So unless you're murdering someone in the UK, you're probably fine because there just aren't enough police. But I think eventually they'll get that sorted out, and I think it's still going to be relatively like business friendly, just because it always has been. Like it's just the way the UK has been set up for years. So that's a long rambling answer to be like, there's a lot of grey. There's some good stuff in terms of like the data stuff, but like I think crypto and like general consumer protection, I wouldn't say is like that clear in the UK at the moment, which is a shame. And it means that people go elsewhere.
That's fine, man. Of course, you know if it's grey, it's grey, and it's one of those things where, again, like just like in the US, if you're not clear now, if you're behind now, then you could end up behind in the future as a country, as a US, as USA, as a UK. You know, you can end up losing a lot of market share to something that will, you know, is the equivalent of the internet in the 90s. You know.
I mean that is just a like really quick point on that. Actually, that's something I maybe have noticed inside the last year is around this time last year there was really nothing going on in London. I mean it was coming out of COVID, all that kind of stuff, but it was still very very quiet. But there's starting to be like more meetups. there are more projects that I'm starting to become aware of that are like doing crypto in London, certainly London and across the UK. And that maybe makes me think that like we obviously started 2 years ago, so we've been set up for a while, but maybe there is more clarity now. Like maybe it's a lot easier to start up and understand where you are. Because otherwise, like there wouldn't be these communities doing stuff there. They'd be in like Lisbon and places with sunshine that are much nicer to work in and still have that clarity.
Oh yeah, Lisbon and Dubai, right? Cameron,
Yeah, exactly.
sorry, can I just ask Cameron if you so let's say that either your NFT projects, Chola Ghosts, or maybe Kadama, either of them would be benefited by you if the US clamped down enough that you would need to move in any way. Would you prefer to move to like a more crypto friendly jurisdiction like Dubai or Lisbon or anywhere else for that matter, or maybe the Swiss like Bitcoin Valley?
I should have told you he's a Canadian.
A Canadian?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
that's why I invited him on. He likes hockey, so I invited him on.
Like, I haven't watched the NHL in like 10 years, man.
Just messing with
I'm from Vancouver. We don't like hockey. Yeah, I mean, Canada's kind of fucked right now anyways, so it's one of those things where, yeah, I mean, luckily we're kind of one of those countries that, I mean, we proved it with legalization of marijuana and everything that our government has no problem, allowing the public to do what they want as long as they take their cut. So and we have really kind of weird laws anyways, like, like we have capital gains tax. So like basically everything that is crypto is capital gains tax unless you can prove that it's like, that's why for me, for mining, that's actually why I haven't done my taxes in the last couple of years, because I actually have to go to a legitimate like crypto tax lawyer just to make sure that I don't pay capital gains tax on every single NFT that I've purchased and bullshit. And it's just like, so we need it here. Sadly, like fucking Trudeau just doesn't care. Like, it's one of those things where you guys were talking about taxation and overtaxation and stuff like that. And for me, it's one of those things where when you pay taxes and those taxes are actually put back into your country and your, daily life, I don't mind paying taxes. I don't mind over taxation even, as long as I see that money coming back to me as it should be, and that is very far from what happens these days, at least in Canada here. 9 times out of 10, we're sending billions and billions of dollars to other countries for, God knows whatever reasons. I don't need to get into politics too crazy, but it's like we have under like 40 million people in our country, and you're sending billions of dollars to a country that has even less amount of people than us. And it's like, why don't you just fucking send everyone $1 million in your country and see how fast that gets spent and put right back into your fucking pocket? You know what I mean? It's just like, but hey, that's why I'm not in the government. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, even me, just myself, like being in the film industry as well, when COVID hit, like Canada was on full lockdown. Like, I'm unvaccinated. I couldn't even leave my city, basically. And so, yeah, it just like, it's been very eye-opening what's been happening the last few years. We can relate it to ourselves a lot to the States right now, as far as like, it's just everything you see happening on a federal level is just backwards from what you should normally be doing for your country. But, it is what it is. It's like, we've got so many, like I'm from Vancouver Island myself. And so like we grew up, we're like logging, fishing, that kind of stuff. Like natural resources are our thing. Well, now, like all the mills have been shut down because they can't survive, which is hilarious because of just how our trade system works. we have to do business with China. So for that, we have to send them our raw lumber. And then we buy milled lumber back from them. Well, that's a fucking great idea. It's just certain things like that where it's like, congratulations for fucking trying to help China out, basically. It's like, you're not doing any favors for your public. You're not doing any favors for anybody here. The foreign interest, like anyone who owns an apartment in Vancouver is a foreigner. Like 95% of Canadians can't even fathom fucking owning a house these days, let alone literally owning a second home that you can rent out and make money off of, right? So there's a lot that needs to happen for me, I guess, long story short, to really want to stay in Canada even long term. But it's kind of one of those things where it's like, it doesn't matter where you go around the world, 9 times out of 10 it'll catch up to you. It's like everyone is at the beck and call of what happens down in the States. As soon as the States changes anything, 9 times out of 10 the Canadian government just follows suit. So if things get locked down in the States, they're just going to get locked down equally here too. So I don't know. To be honest, right now, I've already been thinking about trying to just like move out of Canada and find a beach house somewhere that I can buy for super cheap and expat out of, and then I'll probably just work out of the States and like Texas and stuff, right? We kind of are the same idea here in Canada though too, is we have Alberta and Alberta is that exactly, like they're the Texas of the North pretty much. They're our main natural resources. They're the only province that doesn't have a provincial tax because they don't fucking need it because they make so much goddamn money off of our natural resources and the oil fields and shit like that. They've even been threatening to leave Canada because they're actually the only cash positive province in all of Canada. So they can just be like, fuck you, we don't need you. So, there's always something interesting going on in Canada pretty much. So yeah, I'd love to get the fuck out of here if I could, but time and money willing, I guess.
Fuck, man. Canada sounds amazing.
I love that. The whole sequence of events just occurred because it is true that it's very similar to the States. And, I love crypto so much that I could move to another country and denounce my American. I never thought it was even a thing, me doing something like that. But I mean, it is what it is. I don't want to live in a country that doesn't want to see the future. I mean, it's crazy. Like his points of view are pretty much the same with America, right? Like I don't want to get on like the politics side of it, but I look around and America has so much money, but yet like me going from like Pittsburgh to Chicago, every single road is always under construction. It's all antiquated. There's potholes everywhere. It's like, where's all this money going, man? There's trillions and trillions of dollars, and they spend on buying more tanks and put more tanks over this country and that country for what, And I do agree, like putting the money back to where it came from and improving everything. And like, that's the type of person that I want running the country wherever I lived at. I want them to put the money back into like the communities and make it better and stuff like that. Not that other countries shouldn't get some help from more established and more developed countries, but I do agree there's really no accountability. And kind of to tie that point, and that's why like I really like what Galactica is doing and just crypto as a whole when it comes to governance. And just imagine being able to vote on just like bills, right? Like any bill that passes. Like why do we only get to vote on what representative is going to be in office? Like why can't we vote on our local bills and be able to be accountable and through crypto? And for the people that are like, well, that's going to take too much time. Well, if you don't want to vote on everything, you can give your vote to say a validator or someone that you trust, like a representative, to vote on your behalf. And I think the governance side of things in crypto is really fascinating to me because it's obviously broken. Like, I mean, I think the last time I went to go vote, like you go into this part and they're like, oh, Republicans on that side and Democrats on that side. It's just like really weird and awkward. And, it's like, what is this? Like you already know who registers to vote one way or the other. Like, why is it, that shouldn't even be a thing. It's no one's business, And like, I feel like recently, the last decade, everyone asked that question. Even the vaccination thing, we were just kind of talking about that. Like, when did it come normal to like ask people about their health? Like, not how are you feeling, but are you vaccinated or non-vaccinated? That's no one's business, to be honest with you. Did anyone ask me that before? Did you get your flu shots? Like, I never really was asked that before. Then COVID happened, and then it was just like, oh, did you get your vaccination? Like, it's not your business. And then all the things that they were portraying weren't true, and they didn't even apologize. Like, it was like worldwide, but especially here in the States, like they were trying to basically say that if you get the shot, it was impossible to get it or give it to anyone else, and it was completely false. Like, that narrative was 100% garbage, and I knew it was the whole entire time. So, shout out to Cameron for, I guess, probably thinking the same as I do and standing up for your rights and believing in what you believe in. And, I did the research, and I'm not here to say people shouldn't, I my thing is about freedom. And I love that part of what he was saying about that providence, because I just like, even in crypto, even if people build stuff that I'm not going to use, I just like options and choices. And I think it's people's rights to be able to do what they want to do, as long as you're not inflicting harm on others, and no one should tell you exactly what you should have to do in life. So I think, crypto just holds more accountability, even on the governance side of things. I guess that's my long-winded point of view. And it's not necessarily just only for financial activity, but more for governance as well.
Well, I couldn't agree more on that one, Oz. I mean, like, that's something that we believe so completely thoroughly. It's built into our very DNA. I mean, that's probably one of the reasons why we're all here. Really, if we move past the financial part of crypto, it's the social part, and that's the one. Funny enough, the social part is the one thing that isn't currently really embedded in most blockchains. That's one of the things we're trying to achieve, is get the reputation on the social side of things. Those kind of transactions on chain, so we can get the more meritocratic style of governance available on chain, to get people actually involved in governance in a way that makes sense to them, and so they can actually vote on the things that matter to them and actually make a difference. I just would like to just do a very quick reset, because we've gone over a lot of topics, and we've got one more little section I'd like to do on the space. Just would like to say, everyone who has joined us in the listeners, thank you so much. You are welcome, in fact, to request to speak if you wish, and we can get you up here just for this last section. And you can talk to any of the speakers, anything you wish. So if you could just jump down into the comments, it would be really helpful if you could give us a like and a retweet. That really helps us just get the space out there to more people. I think we've Ruben joined us on stage a little while ago, and I'm sorry, mate, I haven't actually introduced you yet. Ruben's been on a couple of our spaces before as a speaker. Welcome, mate. Did you have a take on one of the points we've been talking about?
I had a couple. Most of them are popular. Some of them aren't. The popular ones are just aligning with what Shade was saying earlier around pluralism, right? The more sort of there's a strength in diversity, and I think that's true on a sort of biological sense, but I think it's also true in a behavioral sense and an infrastructural sense, right? The more ways there are of doing something, the more resilience there is overall. And I think one of the strengths and weaknesses of crypto land is that if you're trying to create a regulatory framework where people can do good stuff as decided by all of us together, through consensus, and people can't do bad stuff as defined by all of us together through consensus and contextually, and there's a million ways to do things. Well, you lock down 900,999 ways, and you create all the gating infrastructure, and you prevent all the things. And guess what? There was one that was left open, right? So I think it's really challenging for any nation state to sort of simultaneously espouse freedom to the individual whilst protecting the interests of the aggregate. And it's that dichotomy of, yes, freedom to the individual, but freedom to the extent those freedoms don't depend upon the freedoms of other individuals, right? And so, we have things like free speech, which I think is really important. I think it's pretty fundamental to any state, with a sort of jurisdictional state or community state, to sort of maintain a degree of people being able to talk about stuff and possibly have conflicting views and so on and so forth. But when you look at something like false advertising laws, is it okay for a pharmaceutical company to come out and say, hey, this cures cancer, and then pay the advertisers get their money, and then people buy the product and it turns out it creates cancer, right? Like, free speech, but also like is that freedom to the individual, the advertiser, in a way that does not impinge upon the freedoms of the people who are taking the thing that now suddenly have
that's
cancer,
kind
right?
of that argument where like your ability to swing your arms, like your freedom to swing your arms, ends at my face, right?
Right. And so I have mixed feelings, and this gets to the unpopular part. I have mixed feelings around the vaccine stuff, because I can see a scenario where someone said, hey, have you had your rubella shots? Being like, well, it's a tough one, man, because like there's a difference between somebody who is sick and isn't infectious, and a scenario where someone is definitely infectious, right? Like if somebody caught the fantasy series cordyceps mushroom that turns you into a zombie, I would be okay with people asking, are you a zombie, at the front door, because I don't know if I want to hang out with a zombie today, right? Maybe we can get a bubble, maybe we can get like a zombie-sized condom or something, but like I want to know if I'm hanging out at a party with a zombie today. So it's again balancing the equities of individual freedoms versus the impacts, not just the first order impacts, but the second and third order impacts on large populations, which are made up of a lot of diverse groups, often which conflict around certain things, right? Freedom of right to exercise one's religion, I think it's useful, because I think without it, you sort of get government clamp down on people's behaviors. But then you also want to have separation of church and state. Otherwise, the government's telling you that you got to worship Zeus in the classroom, and that also feels kind of weird. So I think a lot of this stuff is complex, and it's there's an instinct to sort of reduce it to elements that are easy and accessible to understand, and point fingers. And I do know that I don't want that job, right? I think like the least worst thing that I can do as a philosophy nerd who sometimes builds stuff is build tools that increase individual freedom, relative individual freedom. It doesn't mean that they're going to use those tools, right? Like if I don't know how many people have a Swiss Army knife, but like how many Swiss Army knives out there do you think are actually being used on the daily? My guess is like 2%. I think most Swiss Army knives are in somebody's kitchen drawer, just kind of sitting there for the last 3 years. It's a very useful tool. No one's using it. So like, but it doesn't mean that we can't build those tools for everybody, right?
Hi guys, is there any chance I can speak for a second? I have a
Jump in,
story.
Max. What's going on? How you doing?
Yeah, what's going on? Hi guys, I just thought I like went to law school in Harvard, and at the time I went to jail.
Max, we got some mic issues, my guy.
Oh, I went to Harvard to study law back in the day, and then I went to law school, and I'm a fraud.
You're a Ferrari?
Okay, interesting. Ruben, maybe you want to continue. I'm not pretty sure that was just a bit of a troll.
Yeah, I removed him immediately.
I like to give him a window, right? You know what? Not a lot of takeaways here. I do think that through that strength in diversity and through that strength in pluralism, right? I think the crazy part about insert chain maxis is that the greater concentration and centralization we have around any particular methodology, any particular technology, the higher likelihood, you sort of concentrate the attack surface for any opposing power to use that as a vector for control, right? So, you know, I don't use Monero, I don't use Zcash, allegedly, but I'm so glad they exist. Because they get around a lot of stuff, and they also set the tone for technologies that allow, you know, privacy, like on the infrastructural level. And I know that's something you guys are working to on Galactica. Like right at privacy by default, I think is the way to go about it too, right? Because like if you leave it as like an afterthought, everybody who isn't thinking, which feels like a lot of folks sometimes, you know, once the data gets out there, it's very hard to put it back in the box. And at a certain level of data coherence, you can back into the behavior of other actors, right? A good example of that is, I don't know how many genetics nerds are in the room today, but if one has the genetic profile of, I think it's like 6% of any particular species, with a degree of reliability, you can find any other specimen in that species and back into like second or third degree to any other member of that species, because the genes have so much information that you only need about 6% to be able to get 2 degrees on the rest of the graph, which is kind of wild, right? And so I think, you know, it's probably wishful thinking to think we're going to get perfect privacy for everybody all the time. I think reputational graphs are a great way to start, getting that sort of history of record, not just what people are self-identifying as, but also their behavior, right? And then, you know, you can choose whether or not you want to do business with this person based not only on what their profile says, but also based on what their transaction history seems to imply, right? And that's useful. And I think if we can, to the extent that we can decouple top-down controls like specific jurisdiction legislative efforts from the ability for an individual to make decisions and act on those decisions and have agency, I think is to the extent that we, you know, you're still going to get asymmetry in people who have a lot of wealth versus people who have very little wealth. You're still going to get asymmetries between people who live in, you know, a country with only very little infrastructure versus countries with a lot of infrastructure. But I think increasing relative awareness and relative access and relative agency for any particular individual, right, just on the tooling level, I think that's how we start to close those asymmetry gaps, for sure.
That was an very awesome like coverage of a variety of freedoms, as well as like the nuance of like it's not necessarily black and white. Like there's trade-offs to everything. I have to hop off here, but I did want to say one last thing in response to that. I think the reason crypto is so compelling as like a final frontier in terms of freedom is, and this is an Eric Voorhees quote, is that like a lot of these sovereign currencies, they're money by decree, right? And the difference is that crypto is money by choice. And so I think like one of the final frontiers of freedom is money itself, is the sovereignty surrounding use of capital. And capital really summates our efforts and our energy. It's the store of that. And I couldn't think of a more compelling industry and fight to exist within than, you know, freedom of money and the sovereignty to express ourselves along that medium. So that being said, I got to hop off here. Really appreciate the hosting Galactica and the host for inviting me on. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and thanks to everyone who tuned in.
You're more than welcome, Carter. You've been an amazing guest, really. Thank you very much for coming on, man.
Take care, Carter.
Yeah, guys.
No, I was gonna add to that before the next point or we wrap it up is, yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, you think about it, I said all the time to even clients or people that I know, realistically, all money is a symbolization of time, because in order to make whatever you make or to get that currency or money or crypto, you had to devote some sort of time on planet Earth to get that. So it is, I really appreciate that point, that realistically, this is freedom. It's a freedom of choice to partake in what you want to partake in. And yeah, so that's just one of many reasons why I devote so much time and effort into this space. And it really means a lot to me, is because, it is. I say it all the time. I think I say it most of my spaces. I really feel like crypto is the last chance to right, so many wrongs of humanity and get it right, or at least try to get it right, or like start to like go upwards. Because like in our lifetimes, most of the people that are in this space, it's been just nothing but going down for everything. Like the currencies, the purchasing power of your actual currencies of where you're located at, the prices of everything just keep going out of control. Cameron said it earlier. You really can't afford to buy a house anywhere anymore unless you're just in like a really bad area that you don't want to live in anyhow, and the and taxation of everything. So the government puts more money into circulation by choice and by default. That dilutes your time, your value, your money, your energy that you saved, but it gets diluted. Now you don't have as much purchasing power. And if you did purchase something like a home, now your house goes up, not organically, but just basically because they keep diluting it. Now they tax you, and you have property taxes, and your property taxes just keep going up and up and up, but your wealth isn't going up and up and up. So you're forced to sell your home, or you get behind on your taxes or whatever. So this cycle just needs to end. And, I do think crypto is this reset for everything, and we built the tools, right? Like the monetary system is so antiquated and archaic, and we have the tools, and we see it works. And I think it scares a lot of these old dinosaurs that are in these offices throughout the world. They kind of are resistant to it because they got their claws into everything. And crypto is kind of this newer technology that can kind of eradicate all these like just leeches and bad actors. It kind of gets them out of there. Not that it's a perfect solution, but it's way better than what's already out there. So, I just always appreciate everyone that tunes in, gives their points of view, and kind of does this because I think we're all kind of on the same page. It's the same movement, So, go ahead with your point. I just want to throw that in there.
Yeah, if I could just add to that too. It's like we kind of touched on it at the very, very beginning of, what I like about crypto myself is that like it's a level playing field, like unless you're literally, you were early, or you've been, you've gone to school for like development or anything like that, or you've literally been working on the blockchain. Like it doesn't matter what walk of life you come from, what background, what community, what culture, what religion. It literally means nothing when you arrive in crypto. It's up to you to make yourself into what you want in crypto, and you have the ability to do that. Yes, you can just, ride the hips or the coattails or whatever of like an influencer and shit, but, sadly, you're probably going to end up losing more than you make, and you're not going to get the same experience out of it, right? But it's like, you meet people from all over the world, like I said, different walks of life, all that kind of stuff in crypto, because they do all see it as that, in my mind, that level playing field where it's like, it's like go to the bank right now, like specifically my bank. I remembered looking, and it was like, I think it was basically like if you invested $500,000 into their fucking GIC, whatever, blah, 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 fucking savings account, you were getting back, I think it was something like $2,000 a year. And it's like, like I just sit there and laugh, and I'm like, why the fuck would I give you $500,000 of my money to hold on to just so I can get fucking bill money for 1 month? You know what I mean? It's just like, this is ridiculous. You know what I mean? And so it's like these old systems are just so fucked, and you can't do anything with it anyways. You go to the bank and tell them you want to get into crypto, and they'll be like, no. But give us your $50,000 and we'll give you back fucking 1% for the next 15 years of your life, and you'll never see that money again, and it'll never make it worthwhile, Whereas you come to crypto and you can fucking make, millions of dollars off of $20 with fucking Pepe and shit coins, you know what I mean? So it's like, there's, when the right steps are taken, there is freedom behind crypto, because you can, it was like me with my miner. I bought my miner. I sent $15,000 into the nether, and everyone thought I was batshit crazy. I got my miner, Cadena Moon, to $30, and my miner was worth 10 times what I bought it overnight. And then all of a sudden, everyone wanted to be my fucking best friend, and they all wanted to know how I was making so much goddamn money. And it's like, yeah, okay, well, a month ago I was the idiot of the town, right? And so it's just, it's one of those things where it gives you that freedom of, making your own decisions. And I'm one of those people that I would rather do my own research, look into a project, and feel confident about my own actions, even if it rugs, even if I lose every dime that I've put into said project. At least I can turn around, and the only person I have to blame is myself. It's not, fucking the tax man is raising my taxes by X amount, now I can't afford this. Or I listened to this guy and he told me to buy this coin because it was going to moon and it didn't. It's like you can look outwards in life and blame everyone for your fucking problems. But in crypto, it is up to you, unless you're literally falling for a scam or, you get hacked or whatever. But you have the power of your keys, you have the power of your wallets, and that's that. You know what I mean? No one can touch that shit. Even yourself can't touch it if you forget your passwords and shit, right? So it's just it's one of those things where, again, it's to lead back again to what we were talking about the governments and what I see going on. And yeah, COVID was a huge red flag for a lot of us in Canada here, because of the trucker convoy and weird shit that was happening, where all of a sudden you saw systems like GoFundMe were being used against our population. People were getting their pensions revoked for sending $5 to a fucking charity because it was labeled a terrorist organization by my fucking own government. And then they basically the one thing for me is knowledge is power. And we started devolving the minute that we put a price point on knowledge and wisdom, where you're not born, you're not born, with all the fucking knowledge in the world. You have to attain it by going outside and doing shit and learning from others. But we didn't have to put a monetary value on that. You know what I mean? Fuck, most serial killers have a crazy high IQ, and they're regular Joe Blow until they start fucking chopping people's heads off, right? But it's it's just crazy to me that now we've gotten to the point where we'll change dictionaries, and that's what Canada's been doing, is they'll take a regular old word and they will change the meaning of it. And next thing you know, the next generation goes and looks up that word that for the last 35 years has meant one thing, now all of a sudden means a completely different thing, just because the government says so. And so now that is your knowledge being shared. It's not proper knowledge, it's not the right knowledge, it's what they fucking choose for you to fucking say, right? And that's where, for me, it became very, prevalent of the systems that we're living in right now are just, they're out to get us, not out for us. You know what I mean? It's a crazy time we live in. And, obviously with what's going on over in Ukraine still, and just how it's become a fight for the fucking world and a fight for democracy and a fight for all this bullshit, when it's I hate to say it, but I wouldn't fucking want to spend $1 on that fight. You know what I mean? But here my country is spending billions and billions of dollars on this shit and don't have a say, don't have anything to do with it. So again, it's just, it's crazy. And there's this one little solace is fucking crypto. It's just I can hide in my computer, and there's plenty of things to do on crypto at all times that keeps me out of the news and keeps me out of all this craziness, I guess you could say, that's around. It's just crazy times that we live in, and there's definitely a safe space that can be found, obviously, depending on where you're going exactly in crypto, crypto can be like anything else in life. It can be very fucking toxic. But, again, it's kind of like you have the power to, again, you have the power to cancel that out of your life, or, you can, remain in the toxic waters if you want to, but that's kind of the way I see crypto for, 95% of people right now is that, it's a way to get away from all this other bullshit and try and make something for yourself, which governments don't want us to do that shit. They don't want, especially here in Canada, like they're even talking about the national, bringing in a national like minimum wage. So no one has to work anymore. You'll get your 30 grand a year from the government. And that's that, if you can't survive off that, well, shitty for you. You know what I mean? And so it's like, there's a lot of weird shit going on, and, yeah, I guess that's my long-winded rant done. But yeah, it's, crypto again is definitely, when used properly, again, it can be very, liberating and freeing, for anyone and anyone around the world too. Like you can come from a fucking village in the jungle and only have $20, and that's how you get started in crypto, like it doesn't matter, right? So that's, I guess what I like about crypto. Long story short.
Fuck, man, I love the passion.
I'm gonna jump into like the brief silence just to say I need to duck out. Unfortunately, it's late over here, but this group has been awesome. Thanks for having me, and it's been like so good to meet you guys, and would love to do it again. And yeah, really enjoyed the topic or topics, and would be back in a heartbeat. And yeah, likewise, I'll get our team to like drop a note over as well. It'd be great to have you guys on ours. And thanks again, and enjoy the rest of the space.
All right, Fraser, have a good one, buddy.
Peace out.
Thanks, Fraser. You're always welcome back up here, man.
Likewise. Thanks. All the best. Bye.
Yeah, Cameron, that was amazing. Like I say, I absolutely love the passion there, dude. Seriously, and yeah, like it does kind of feel like I don't know. I don't know if it's just in the Western world or if it's just in the entire world, but it seems like even democratic governments they're closing in on like on the privacy side of things, on just control. I mean, in the UK, I mean, Fraser just left, but he would have probably had a word on this. But in the UK, they've started like arresting protesters before they've actually protested, just in order to save face on on things like the coronation of the king, that kind of thing, and just really cracking down on freedoms. But this is all coming very slowly. Anything that happens really quickly, like a really like a legislation that comes in that's obviously anti-people, that stuff, people will raise their arms about. But when it comes in slowly like this, it's like a slow, inexorable tide of just oppression. It's a scary thing. But I say, absolutely love the passion in your speech there, man. Seriously, it's just like blockchain really is this. It's the ultimate form of freedom and self-sovereignty and just the ability to have your own way and say your own words. And it's a beautiful thing. It really is. Okay, guys, I think it's probably a good idea to start wrapping this up. So if I just want to say, if anyone who's been listening to us today, I'm so thankful that you guys have come up and listened to us. If you could just drop into the comments, give us a retweet and give us a like still, that would really help us still just get the recording out, that kind of thing, just get more information to more people. And so we really appreciate that. So I'd just like to get some final thoughts from you guys, or if you'd just like to say your goodbyes and tell us and give us a shill of anything you'd like to shill, that's absolutely fine too. I'll do mine first because I'm the host and I can. So there you go. So you've been listening to Into the Cypher State, guys. We are Galactica Network. We're a protocol that's aiming to give basically you the right to do everything that we've been kind of speaking about on this podcast. We're aiming to give you your privacy. We're aiming to give you your freedom. We're aiming to giving you a persistent identity on chain that actually allows you to have a record of your reputation, and then use that reputation on chain to inform your transactions. It's getting that social piece of the puzzle back onto blockchain. whereas before we've only really had the financial. That's us. That's Galactica Network. That's what we're trying to offer and what we're trying to do. These podcasts, we're trying to get the community together and get ideas like this and get people talking about the important stuff rather than just the financial side of things. There's plenty of spaces out there for NFT projects and for all the awesome stuff that's going on in the space. But we just want to do the stuff that I don't know. It should matter to a lot of people. It might be a small thing, but it matters to us. So, Poss, if there's anything you'd like to say as a final thought.
No, I just wanted to thank everyone, and I guess keep it short is just keep fighting the good fight, everyone. And I appreciate everyone, and if you ever need anything, I'm always here to help. And today, today's conversation was really good. So if anyone kind of tuned in late, I would recommend listening to the recording because it was really good, and we had some good guests, and we covered a lot of topics and very important topics. So that's all. Thank you, everyone.
That was by co-host Cosmos Hoss. Thank you very much, man. It's always awesome having you up, dude. Cameron, if you'd like to say something as a final thought.
Yeah, no, just thanks for having me and great chats and everything. And yeah, it's as you kind of just said as well. It's one of those things where it's interesting to see how much is going on in the Twitter space now for crypto, is just for that exactly, like the mental health side of things, and really kind of again like sharing that knowledge, right? That's kind of what needs to happen. And it is very much like it's like pumping your own bags kind of thing, right? Like to really gain that mass adoption, we have to fly the flag and do it properly, right? And so yeah, just it's nice to see advocates of again, like this space and the people that are trying to share that knowledge and show that we can have again, we can have things that protect people and newcomers to the space, like privacy and so on and so forth, but that doesn't hamper the ability to, gain and progress through life with crypto, So yeah, again, just thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for coming by and listening to my rants. And yeah, that's about that.
Cameron, you can always come up and you can always rant. We really appreciate it. And I personally love the rants. It's awesome. Okay, guys, thank you very much for listening, everyone in the audience. It's been absolutely awesome. Again, please, I've said it 1,000 times, just jump down, give us a like, a retweet. It really helps out my ego. If we can, we're just going to do a bit of a fade out. And if you could just make sure that you drop a like on the way out, we'd really appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you on the next episodes. So make sure you check out our Twitter and make sure you follow us. Get on the next episode of Into the Cypher State. And we will see you next time, everyone. Thank you very much for your time.